All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Office Hours. I know it still says SmartConnect Office Hours, but moving forward, this will be an eOne Office Hours where we will talk about both SmartConnect and PopDoc. So it's less frequently than it used to be. We'll be doing this a once a month thing. So if you have a suggestion, make sure you submit that and we'll get to it. We haven't been doing this for a few months, so I do want to touch on a new feature in smartconnect.com that I think is going to be very useful moving forward, especially once those are available with on-premise coming up after the code merge, which is due to be out next week. So hopefully these are some exciting new features that you'll be able to implement very soon. So we're going to have the same agenda that we've always had. We'll have an introduction, I'll show, demo a topic for the week. Then you can ask any questions you have, and we'll talk about what training and support options are available. So our topic for this week is global variable features. So we've actually added two exciting new features to global variables in smartconnect.com. The first one is the ability to persist a run value. So whatever the value is in that global variable at the end of the map run will be saved to the SmartConnect database. So the next time that the map runs, it'll use that value. The other option is select at runtime. And so a select at runtime means that before you can run the map, it's going to pop up and ask you, what value should I use for this global variable? So there have been workarounds to do this stuff with on-premise Smart Connect, but obviously those workarounds no longer worked with the online version. So we've built into the functionality, and like I said, it'll be coming to on-premise Smart Connect in the future. So without further ado, let me share. So in Smart Connect, just so that everyone is on the same page, global variables are a way for us to kind of use a value either in multiple maps, so you can pass it down to children maps, or you can use it to filter a data source, or you could use it to send something in an email. You can do a lot of things with these, but we're gonna kind of look at it from a data source perspective because that's, I think, where these two new features are the most prevalent. So I have a global variable here that I've created called global filter date, and I've put in a default value of this. So let me just copy this and create a new bulk data source. So on my bulk data source, I'm going to set up a Business Central OData query to pull in some customers. I'm going to call customers date from my sandbox instance. Validates, and I'm going to say from my sample connector, let's find the customer card. So if I save this, why must be blind at customer state, there it is. So if I preview, there is a date filter field called last_date modified. So if I go in here and I add a filter saying, so I say last_date modified equals my global variable, and preview, it finds no records. But what if I say greater than or equal to my date and preview? I don't think I remembered my syntax correct. So we're just gonna do greater than. So any date that's greater than, it was like February of 2020, then it should return record. So it's running my query, and whenever it runs this, it's going to replace the value of global filter date with whatever the current value is. So as this goes, my Business Central seems to be a little slow to respond today. So the nice thing about this is that these filters, I'm passing the filter directly to Business Central. So Business Central is running this and only presenting the data to SmartConnect that I'm requesting. So if you were to use this edit query option and apply the filter in there, that means that SmartConnect is going to request all customers and then apply the filter based on the data set that it's already retrieved. So from a performance perspective, the best place to put these filters is in this filter box here. Why is that not? Let me just go back. Oh, there it goes. Well, it previewed eventually. I just wasn't patient enough. So last date modified is greater than this value. Save it. All right, so now if I go and I use this in a integration process, so let's create a new one. We'll call it filter date. So it's a bulk data load with the Business Central OData connector. So you can use this on other ones. I'm just using Business Central as an example, but I could use this with CRM, Salesforce, a REST connector, NetSuite. All of them support using global variables in your data source. So you can get really crazy with your filter queries as needed. Next, I'm going to tell it to export that data to my, well, I'm just going to say export it to a file. So if you ever don't want to create a map, you're just kind of testing your data source, you can just output it to a file. It doesn't need to go to an FTP server. SmartConnect will just save it on the local server. So you can go under you can go under process history and then go to process outputs and download that file because it didn't actually save it to anywhere. So I'm just going to map a couple fields so that I can save my map. So I'm going to say map number, map name, and then save it. So now, because I'm using a global variable, I need to reference that variable somewhere. So I need to go to some script and add that so that SmartConnect knows it needs to use this variable. So I'm just going to call it initialize the variable. So it's going to be a script. The script I'm going to say run on a successful completion of the map, always return true, but first let's say global filter date is equal to global filter date. Okay, so I'm just basically setting it back to whatever its current value is. All right, so then I can save and let's run it now. So if I run it right now, so I want to see what my record count is because as I manipulate this global variable, my record counts should be changing. So on this first run, my record count, come on. Starting to think that there's more records in this Business Central than I realized. So while that's working, we have a blog article all about global variables in smartconnect.com. So in here we talk about the default values, about these different ways that you can manipulate them and set them. And then there's also examples of using these in data source queries. So in Business Central, here's how you would reference a global variable. Here's how you would calculate a global variable date filter. And we show it for customer engagement, for SQL Server. So whatever your data source is, we'll show you the different ways that you can create those queries and get that data that you need. Okay, so that's why that map took forever because there was 1,500 records that have been modified in like the last year. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open my integration process again, and let's try and let's try and filter this down. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say on the global variables tab, I'm going to say I want to select a new date at runtime. And I can give it a name. I'm just going to say select a date. All right, so let's update that. And we're going to tell it I want to run. So now when I click run, I get this new section, runtime settings. And it's going to say select a date. And I'm going to say I want to only pull ones that have been modified since the end of September. Okay, so now this only found 49 records, much quicker. So let's look at making things a little bit more dynamic. So the last option is to persist a run value. So I want to kind of do more of an incremental export. So every time it'll pull only the records that have been modified since the last time it ran. So to do this, I'm going to say I don't want it to pull that much on the first run. So I'm going to tell it to only run for 50 records. I'm going to tell it to persist run value, but then I need to set what that run value will be. So I'm going to modify my query here with, so I don't need to reinvent the wheel. Let's copy this. So you can select the format that you want. We only care about this, and my global variable has a different name. So global filter date is equal to the current date timestamp. Save it. So now when I run this, so this first time it's going to use what I hard coded as the value, so it'll be about 50 records. Okay. Now if I go and I run this integration again, now my record count is going to be 0. So if I open it up and we take a look at my global variables tab, over here you can see that the current run value has been updated to today's date. So this way I can keep those values and create an incremental export based on the current date. Obviously, this isn't the perfect example because it isn't a date timestamp, but if it did include the time on it, I could have just used one of my other formattings to say include the time, and then it would persist for that particular date time. So there's a lot of really powerful stuff when we start talking about using global variables in this way. One of the places that's becoming increasingly popular is with the REST connector because we can't, how do we filter? We can't put a change data source or real-time data source inside of a REST API. So what we need to do is have SmartConnect remember what the last data was that it pulled out, and then to ask just for new data after that particular run. So on to questions. Oh yes, I forgot to say. So if a different integration process is using the same global variable, will it persist the value for the other maps, or does it become local for each integration process? So if in this, it actually goes into detail about how that works, but so default values versus map values. So when you go and you create it, it's assigned a value. This is the default value. Then if you set that in a map, this is actually stored in a completely separate table. So you'll see there's a reload value. So if I clicked reload value, it would pull back what was set up in the connect or in the original global variable setup, and then they would be the same again. But this is a value that's unique to the integration process. So to answer your question, if we had two maps that both used my global filter date, each map would keep that value for the variable independent. And the only way to get them back to the default is to open it up and say reload that default value. And then it pulls from here. So you don't need to create a new variable for every map. They are kept specific to the map, so that wouldn't be a problem. And then the prompt where you're able to provide a value. So I go in and I type in the current date. If you do that and you try to schedule the map, it'll just use whatever the current default value for the map is. So there isn't a way for you to push that in. Keep the questions coming if you have any more, if I missed anything. I do want to touch on the training. We do still have training. We have been offering training all of 2020. We're no longer doing our in-person boot camps, but we've been offering boot camps in both smartconnect.com and PopDoc, and also doing some on-premise SmartConnect training all throughout the year. Every month you can sign up for one of our boot camps. We also have a new advanced REST connector training, which is coming out. The first one will be in December, and then you'll be able to learn all about the new REST connector so you can connect to anything. If you have any topic suggestions that you want us to go over, you can email those into office hours at eOne Solutions. Like I said, we're going to try to go over some of the new features that are coming in SmartConnect and into PopDoc so that we can keep you up to date on what's coming and what's new. But we also want to know what sort of challenges you're running into. And then we also have resources available for you when you're not able to attend office hours. You can go to our support center, reach out to our support and professional services teams, and you can also purchase hours to work directly with our experts. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions, and yeah, let us know. I don't see any more questions, so I think we'll call it good for today. We'll see you again next month for our next eOne's office hours. We'll probably touch on a PopDoc issue then. Haven't decided what we're going to do, so you can shoot us an email if there's something you'd like to see. Otherwise, have a great weekend.